Chapter 42. After my experiences with Hannes and Sverre, Fleur and Dor conceded that my prospects of getting a husband had improved. "Fran, maybe you can get one of those foreigners to marry you." My teacher said that Europeans reverence the full figure. Fleur had taken art appreciation classes, and we had all giggled over the pictures in her book of fat ladies laying around on pieces of drapery without any clothes on. I found the pictures intimidating. The ladies looked too much like me, with Roman noses and in need of some weight reduction. "What's art appreciation?" Dor asked. Papa was sitting in his chair by the window studying his briefs. "It's appreciating pictures of fat ladies laying around without any clothes on." "If they have the drapery material, there's no excuse," Fleur said. "Why don't they cover up?" Papa explained. "Because then the artist wouldn't learn how to paint fat ladies without clothes on." "Gee, does that mean that if Fran married a foreigner, she'd get to lay around all time naked?" Dor asked. Naked? Of all the words in my vocabulary, this word had the greatest shock value. To me, being on display in that unthinkable state was, well, unthinkable. All it took for me to break out in a cold sweat was the recollection of Miss Knight pulling up my dress and spanking me before the whole class, the boys seeing me uncovered after I was run over, the boys running down the dock at Rainier Beach, or the sheik undressing me with his eyes. All of our lives we heard, "Nice girls keep themselves covered up." Although we didn't agree with all of Mama's theories, we certainly agreed on that. We never ran around the house in our birthday suits. Mama was always properly attired, right down to the corsets. We seldom saw Papa in any state of undress, except at the mountain when he would step from the bed to the nail on the wall where he hung his trousers. The most we had ever seen of Papa's underwear was when it hung on the clothesline, where Mama practiced strict segregation. Female garments on one end, and at the other end, Papa's long wool trap drawers for winter and his cotton BVDs in summer. At the swimming pool, some of the girls left their dressing room doors open, and while they dressed, casually discussed their times, boyfriends, or other world problems. Some of the bolder girls even ran around the dressing area in their birthday suits. A couple of times, Dorothy and I kept our doors open just to be part of the gang, but I for one was so red, embarrassed, and fumbling that I finally shut my door and dressed in private. Florence never dressed in public. She was an absolute prude. Now that I had disfiguring abdominal scars, I was more sensitive than ever. When I had gone back to school, I found it hard to stand up straight and face the world. I expected everyone to say, "Did you go away and have a baby?" My failure to graduate added to my dilemma. Mama reminded me of what a disgrace I was to my family. I could hear all the corpses in Wisconsin and Indiana moaning for generations back. 4.5 years in high school! Now that it looked like I wasn't going to do much better at the university, Mama lamented that she didn't know what to do with me. She told Papa, the only good grades Fran ever got were in choir and music appreciation, and the only money she ever earned was from the berry fields. Papa said, "Then send her back to the berry fields." Mama ignored that. "She's going to have to earn money doing the only thing she's good at." "What the hell is she good at?" Papa asked. "She's good at singing." With that, Mama announced that she was taking me to a booking agent. A booking agent! I was floored. What confidence. To think that I could earn money singing. "But Mama, I'm not ready." "Well, get your shoes on and you'll be ready." I never saw Mama so full of purpose. There was no way I was going to change her mind. I was dragged along. During the audition, I acted so hateful and belligerent that I was sure the agent wouldn't even bother to put my card in his file. To my surprise, within a week, I had a club date at one of the big hotels. Mama was elated. She hurriedly made me a beautiful dark green satin formal with gold lace trim and bought me gold spike-heeled shoes. Of course, they were a half size too small, which made walking even more difficult than walking in spike heels normally. In spite of my tortured walk, the agent announced that I had gone over well, so Mama took me to another agent. I acted the same hateful way and got more calls. What I didn't know then was that off stage, most entertainers act hateful, belligerent, and cynical about their work. You play the jobs you get and don't ask too many questions. Questions about what? I asked. Questions about where you play, who you play for, and money you get. In spite of my new earning capacity, Papa saw little hope of being relieved of my care in the foreseeable future. Then, unexpectedly, I came up with the answer. We had invited our swimming friend, Olive Erlin, to lunch. Olive was an outstanding example of a local girl making good. 2 years before, she had gone to Fairbanks, Alaska, and found a job as a waitress. Now, She had returned home for a short vacation and expected to return to Fairbanks soon. She told us glorious tales of adventure. We were infatuated. For years, we had heard Papa's stories of living in Alaska, but that had been 30 years earlier, and he was a man. Olive's stories were fresh and new, and she was a girl, just 1 year older than me, making lots of money and living in the wilderness. Well, it's not exactly the wilderness, Olive said. It's a little town, 2,000 people, with about 13 men to 1 woman. It has 1 main street and a train station. The streets are unpaved. In the summer there's dust, and in the winter there's ice and snow. The temperature in winter is usually below 0, sometimes 50 below. Flora was pouring tea from Mama's best teapot. Do you live in an igloo? Olive laughed. No, but I live in a little log cabin with my girlfriend and we have a wood stove. Wow, I wouldn't mind living in a log cabin in freezing weather with that many men. Could I get a job as a waitress? I said. Sure you could. I made the decision right then. When Olive returned to Fairbanks, I was going with her. I began to apply myself immediately, stacking Mama's good china from my wrist to my shoulder, the way I had seen waitresses do. Olive, how would you like to have your reproductive cells cooked? Everyone laughed, except Mama. Frances, that's my best china. When Papa came home that afternoon, I blurted out my expectations. Papa voiced his concerns. Fran, if you do this, you'll never go on with college. Mama said, and you'll never go on with your music. Doggone. They had nagged for months. Now I finally had an answer, and they were opposed. I asked Papa for the fare. He refused. Well, if you won't give me any of your money, then I want some of my money. I was speaking about the money from the inheritance from Uncle Doc. It's not your money until you turn 21. I figured that was not a valid argument. I tried to reason with him. Both Flora and Dor had already received their money when they had married. No matter what I said, Papa stood firm. I was heartbroken. I saw Olive off on the boat and told her that Fairbanks and all those men would have to get along without me. If Mama could have known what was to happen next, I'm sure she would have gladly shipped me off to Alaska. It began with a call from a new agent. Are you experienced in this business? I figured I was. He quoted me a price that should have alerted me. It was twice what I normally received. I had no suspicions until I began searching for the address. The light was beginning to fade, making it difficult to locate the numbers. I finally found the place, a dingy building just off Jackson Street in Chinatown. In a state of uncertainty, no, closer to panic, I circled the block. The whole area was teeming with small, dark figures. I found a parking spot, eased the car in, and turned the key. I started to open the door, but I was numb with fear. I just sat there, hoping that time would pass until it was too late to go in. This was not my first time being in Chinatown. Going out for Chinese food had been the thing to do for Flora and her sorority sisters. On several occasions, she had taken me along. In spite of the safety in numbers, we were wary, and kept our wits about us and our purses clutched under our arms. We knew the stories about Chinatown. We all knew of the Chinese underground, a whole system of passages built under the city. We all knew that the Chinese shanghaied white girls, put them on boats, and shipped them to China, where no one ever heard of them again. We had all seen the Fu Manchu movies, filled with sin and corruption. No girl would ever dream of going to Chinatown alone, but here I was. I wanted to start the engine, go home, and tell Mama that it was a horrible place. But Mama wouldn't have believed me. Papa would upbraid me for making an agreement and not fulfilling it. The agent would report that I was unreliable, and I would never get another job from any other agents. Finally I got out, wrestled the accordion from the back seat, grabbed my purse, and began to hobble. Darn those gold spike-heeled shoes, down the littered and badly crumbled sidewalk. The door wouldn't budge, but almost immediately the covering on the tiny window shifted, and I saw a slanty eye peering out at me. Memories of the Chinese bootleggers and the ice cream ghost episode flooded my brain. I had the latch click. The door opened just wide enough for a small, dark, shapeless figure to beckon me in. He quickly closed the door, picked up the accordion, and motioned for me to follow. He was so short that the accordion case was dragging on the floor. He shuffled across a small reception area. I watched with a new horror. He had taken possession of my expensive new accordion. Papa had been utterly amazed at the price. It cost more than a piano. It will help her play better, Al had said. As I watched him disappearing down the dark passage, I remember Papa's words on the first night I had taken it out on a job. I'm not too concerned about you finding your way home, but you better be damn certain that your accordion does. There was nothing to do but follow. Further down the dark passage, I became aware of clanging sounds and strange, musty odors. Opium. I had seen pictures of men lying in tiny bunks smoking pipes, with captions that read, "Once a person gets the taste of opium, they are a slave for life, a worthless addict." I knew that addiction could cause a woman to sell herself into prostitution, a state worse than death, white slavery. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn and run, but I remembered that when the door had closed, I had heard the click of the lock. I was trapped. After a dozen faltering steps, the dark figure ushered me into a low-ceilinged, smoke-filled room. I paused, trying to accustom my eyes. What I saw gave me a great sense of relief. Instead of an opium den, it was a typical crowded Chinese restaurant. Small, darkly attired waiters balancing trays over their heads circulated about the candlelit tables, heaped highly with food and drink. The patrons were obviously in a party mood. I followed the small figure along a dimly lit aisle to the front of the room. He lifted my accordion onto a small stage and gave me instructions. Play until a dancer appears, and then continue to play for her. His last words were, "something sensual." I was not familiar with the word, but assumed that they didn't want the light cavalry overture. As I played and looked out at the audience, I came to realize with some apprehension that all the occupants of the room were men. When I saw that these men had light skin and were wearing business suits and ties, my apprehension began to fade. These were men like Papa, I thought. Suddenly, the lights dimmed and the audience came alive. I began playing Solito Lindo with the soft bassoon switch. The dancer's entrance was greeted with a boisterous roar. I looked up to see a woman in a slinky black gown and long gloves slithering onto the stage. I watched as she sauntered back and forth several times, while the men who had given me such a sense of relief continued whooping it up. I couldn't figure out the reason for all the excitement. She certainly received a much better reception than I had. What was so special about her? A bleached blonde with heavy makeup, she was older than me. As old as Mama, I thought. She began to remove a glove. The men began calling out, more words that were not in my vocabulary. Loosening each finger of her glove very slowly, she began pulling from the palm, the wrist, and then the elbow. She paused. The crowd roared, "Take it off!" Finally grasping the middle finger of her glove, she pulled it off her hand and loped it lazily about her head. With a slithering movement, she threw it out to the audience. That practically brought down the house. Then she unbuttoned her other glove, threw that to the audience, and began unbuttoning the hooks on her gown. I couldn't believe what my mind was telling me. My mouth and throat felt like I had swallowed an endless stream of that dreaded liquid in the small basement room. Finally, I was able to focus on a spot on the ceiling, which seemed to be the only spot in the place that wasn't whirling out of control. I could feel the stares of the men. I knew that my face had turned beet red. I lost all sense of time. Then, in one explosive moment, I knew that, while I was standing there in my beautiful dark green satin formal with a gold lace trim, she was standing there naked.